The Princess and the Goblin, Chapter 14. That Night Week. During the whole of the week, Irene had been thinking every other moment of her promise to the old lady, although even now she could not feel quite sure that she had not been dreaming. Could it really be that an old lady lived up in the top of the house with pigeons and a spinning wheel and a lamp that never went out? She was, however, none the less determined on the coming Friday to ascend the 3 stairs, walk through the passages with the many doors, and try to find the tower in which she had either seen or dreamed her grandmother. Her nurse could not help wondering what had come to the child. She would sit so thoughtfully silent, and even in the midst of a game with her, would so suddenly fall into a dreamy mood. But Irene took care to betray nothing, whatever efforts Ludi might make to get at her thoughts. And Ludi had to say to herself, "What an odd child she is," and give it up. At length, the long looked-for Friday arrived, and lest Ludi should be moved to watch her, Irene endeavored to keep herself as quiet as possible. In the afternoon, she asked for a doll's house, and went on arranging and rearranging the various rooms and their inhabitants for a whole hour. Then she gave a sigh and threw herself back in her chair. One of the dolls would not sit, and another would not stand, and they were all very tiresome. Indeed, there was one that would not even lie down, which was too bad. But now it was getting darker, and the darker it got, the more excited Irene became, and the more she felt it necessary to be composed. "I see you want your tea, Princess," said the nurse. "I will go and get it." "The room feels closed. I will open the window a little. The evening is mild. It won't hurt you." "There is no fear of that, Ludi," said Irene, wishing she had put off going for the tea till it was darker, when she might have made her attempt with every advantage. I fancy Ludi was longer in returning than she intended, for when Irene, who had been lost in thought, looked up, she saw it was nearly dark, and at the same moment caught sight of a pair of eyes, bright with a green light, glowering at her through the open window. The next instant something leapt into the room. It was like a cat, with legs as long as a horse's, Irene said, but its body no bigger, and its leg no thicker than those of a cat. She was too frightened to cry out, but not too frightened to jump from her chair and run from the room. It is plain enough to every one of my readers what she ought to have done, and indeed Irene thought of it herself, but when she came to the foot of the old stair, just outside the nursery door, she imagined the creature running up those long ascents after her, and pursuing her through the dark passages, which, after all, might lead to no tower. That thought was too much. Her heart failed her, and turning from the stair, she rushed along to the hall, whence, finding the front door open, she darted into the court, pursued, at least she thought so, by the creature. No one happening to see her, on she ran, unable to think for fear, and ready to run anywhere to elude the awful creature with the stilt legs. Not daring to look behind her, she rushed straight out of the gate and up the mountain. It was foolish indeed, thus to run farther and farther from all who could help her, as if she had been seeking a fit spot for the goblin creature to eat her in at his leisure. But that is the way fear serves us. It always takes a side of the thing that we are afraid of. The princess was soon out of breath with running uphill, but she ran on, for she fancied the horrible creature just behind her, forgetting that, had it been after her, such legs as those must have overtaken her long ago. At last she could run no longer, and fell, unable even to scream by the roadside, where she lay for some time, half dead with terror. But finding nothing lay hold of her, and her breath beginning to come back, she ventured at length to get half up and peer anxiously about her. It was now so dark that she could see nothing. Not a single star was out. She could not even tell in what direction the house lay, and between her and home she fancied the dreadful creature lying ready to pounce upon her. She saw now that she ought to have run up the stairs at once. It was well she did not scream, for although very few of the goblins had come out for weeks, a stray idler or two might have heard her. She sat down upon a stone, and nobody but no one who had done something wrong could have been more miserable. She had quite forgotten her promise to visit her grandmother. A raindrop fell on her face. She looked up, and for a moment her terror was lost in astonishment. At first she thought the rising moon had left her place and drawn nigh to see what could be the matter with the little girl sitting alone without hat or cloak on the dark bare mountain. But she soon saw she was mistaken, for there was no light on the ground at her feet, and no shadow anywhere, but a great silvery globe was hanging in the air. And as she gazed at the lovely thing, her courage revived. If she were but indoors again, she would fear nothing, not even the terrible creature with the long legs. But how was she to find her way back? What could that light be? Could it be? No, it couldn't. But what if it should be? Yes, it must be her great-great-grandmother's lamp, which guided her pigeons home through the darkest night. She jumped up. She had but to keep that light in view, and she must find the house. Her heart grew strong. Speedily, yet softly, she walked down the hill, hoping to pass the watching creature unseen. Dark as it was, there was little danger now of choosing the wrong road. And, which was most strange, the light that filled her eyes from the lamp, instead of blinding them for a moment to the object upon which they next fell, enabled her for a moment to see it despite the darkness. By looking at the lamp and then dropping her eyes, she could see the road for a yard or two in front of her, and this saved her from several falls, for the road was very rough. But all at once, to her dismay, it vanished, and the terror of the beast, which had left her the moment she began to return, again laid hold of her heart. The same instant, however, she caught the light of the windows and knew exactly where she was. It was too dark to run, but she made what haste she could and reached the gate in safety. She found the house door still open, ran through the hall, and, without even looking into the nursery, bounded straight up the stair, and the next, and the next. Then turning to the right, ran through the long avenue of silent rooms, and found her way at once to the door at the foot of the tower stair. When first the nurse missed her, she fancied she was playing her a trick, and for some time took no trouble about her. But at last, getting frightened, she had begun to search. And when the princess entered, the whole household was hither and thither over the house, hunting for her. A few seconds after she reached the stair of the tower, they had even begun to search the neglected rooms, in which they would never have thought of looking had they not already searched every other place they could think of in vain. But by this time, she was knocking at the old lady's door. Chapter 15. Woven and then Spun. "Come in, Irene," said the silvery voice of her grandmother. The princess opened the door and peeped in, but the room was quite dark, and there was no sound of the spinning wheel. She grew frightened once more, thinking that, although the room was there, the old lady might be a dream after all. Every little girl knows how dreadful it is to find a room empty where she thought somebody was, but Irene had to fancy for a moment that the person she came to find was nowhere at all. She remembered, however, that at night she spun only in the moonlight, and concluded that must be why there was no sweet bee-like humming. The old lady might be somewhere in the darkness. Before she had time to think another thought, she heard her voice again, saying as before, "Come in, Irene." From the sound, she understood at once that she was not in the room beside her. Perhaps she was in her bedroom. She turned across the passage, feeling her way to the other door. When her hand fell on the lock, again the old lady spoke. "Shut the door behind you, Irene. I always close the door of my workroom when I go to my chamber." Irene wondered to hear her voice so plainly through the door. Having shut the door, she opened it and went in. Oh, what a lovely haven to reach from the darkness and fear through which she had come! The soft light made her feel as if she were going into the heart of the milkiest pearl, while the blue walls and their silver stars for a moment perplexed her with the fancy that they were in reality the sky which she had left outside a moment ago, covered with rain clouds. "I've lighted a fire for you, Irene. You're cold and wet," said her grandmother. Then Irene looked again and saw that she had taken for a huge bouquet of red roses on a low stand against the wall was in fact a fire which burned in the shapes of the loveliest and reddest roses, glowing gorgeously between the heads and wings of two cherubs of shining silver. And when she came nearer, she found that the smell of roses with which the room was filled came from the fire roses of the hearth. Her grandmother was dressed in the loveliest pale blue velvet, over which her hair, no longer white but of a rich gold color, streamed like a cataract, here falling in dull gathered heaps, there rushing away in smooth shining falls. And even as she looked, the hair seemed pouring down from her head and vanishing in the golden mist ere it reached the floor. It flowed from under the edge of a circle of shining silver, set with alternated pearls and opals. On her dress was no ornament whatever, neither was there a ring on her hand, or a necklace or carcanet about her neck. But her slippers glimmered with the light of the Milky Way, for they were covered with seed pearls and opals in one mass. Her face was that of a woman of 23. The princess was so bewildered with astonishment and admiration that she could hardly thank her, and drew nigh with timidity, feeling dirty and uncomfortable. The lady was seated on a low chair by the side of the fire, with hands outstretched to take her, but the princess hung back with a troubled smile. "Why, what's the matter?" asked her grandmother. "You haven't been doing anything wrong. I know that by your face, though it is rather miserable. What's the matter, my dear?" And still she held out her arms. "Dear grandmother," said Irene, "I'm not sure that I haven't done something wrong. I ought to have run up to you at once when the long-legged cat came in at the window, instead of running out on the mountain and making myself such a fright. You were taken by surprise, my child, and are not so likely to do it again. It is when people do wrong things willfully that they are more likely to do them again. Come." And still she held out her arms. "But grandmother, you're so beautiful and grand with your crown on, and I am so dirty with mud and rain, I should quite spoil your beautiful blue dress." With a merry laugh, the lady sprang from her chair, more lightly far than Irene herself could, caught the child to her bosom, and kissing the tear-stained face over and over, sat down with her in her lap. "Oh, grandmother, you'll make yourself such a mess," cried Irene, clinging to her. "You darling, do you think I care more for my dress than for my little girl? Besides, look here." As she spoke, she set her down, and Irene saw to her dismay that the lovely dress was covered with mud of her fall on the mountain road. But the lady stooped to the fire, and taking from it, by the stalk in her fingers, one of the burning roses, passed it once, and again, and a third time, over the front of her dress. And when Irene looked, Not a single stain was to be discovered. "There," said her grandmother. "You won't mind coming to me now?" But Irene again hung back, eyeing the flaming rose which the lady held in her hand. "You're not afraid of the rose, are you?" she said, and was about to throw it into the hearth again. "Oh, don't please," cried Irene. "Won't you hold it to my frock, and my hands and my face? And I'm afraid my feet and my knees want it too." "No," answered her grandmother, smiling a little sadly as she threw the rose from her. "It is too hot for you yet. It would set your frock in a flame. Besides, I don't want to make you clean tonight. I want your nurse and the rest of the people to see you as you are, for you will have to tell them how you ran away for fear of the long-legged cat. I should like to wash you, but they would not believe you then. Do you see the bath behind you?" The princess looked and saw a large oval tub of silver, shining brilliantly in the light of the wonderful lamp. "Go and look into it," said the lady. Irene went and came back very silently, with her eyes shining. "What did you see?" asked the grandmother. "The sky, and the moon, and the stars," she answered. "It looked as if there was no bottom to it." The lady smiled a pleased, satisfied smile, and was silent also for a few moments. Then she said, "Any time you want a bath, come to me. I know you have a bath every morning, but sometimes you want one at night too." "Thank you, grandmother. I will indeed," answered Irene, and was again silent for some moments, thinking. Then she said, "How was it, grandmother, that I saw your beautiful lamp? Not the light of it only, but the great round silver lamp itself, hanging alone in the great open air, high up. It was your lamp I saw, wasn't it?" "Yes, my child, it was my lamp." "Then how was it? I don't see a window all round. When I please, I can make the lamp shine through the walls, shine so strong that it melts them away from before the sight, and shows itself as you saw it. But as I told you, it is not everybody can see it." "How is it that I can, then? I'm sure I don't know." "It is a gift born with you, and one day I hope everybody will have it." "But how do you make it shine through the walls?" "Ah, that you would not understand if I were to try ever so much to make you. Not yet, not yet. But," added the lady, rising, "you must sit in my chair while I get you the present I have been preparing for you. I told you my spinning was for you. It is finished now, and I am going to fetch it. I have been keeping it warm under one of my brooding pigeons." Irene sat down in the low chair, and her grandmother left her, shutting the door behind her. The child sat gazing, now at the rose fire, now at the starry walls, now at the silvery light, and a great quietness came over her heart. If all the long-legged cats in the world had come rushing helter-skelter at her then, she would not have been afraid of them for a single moment. How this was, however, she could not tell. She only knew there was no fear in her, and everything was so right and safe that it could not get in. She had been gazing at the lovely lamp for some minutes fixedly. Turning her eyes, she found the wall had vanished, for she was looking out on the dark cloudy night. But though she heard the wind blowing, none of it blew upon her. In a moment more, the clouds themselves parted, or rather vanished like the wall, and she looked straight into the starry herds, flashing gloriously in the dark blue. It was but for a moment. The clouds gathered again and shut out the stars. The wall gathered again and shut out the clouds. And there stood the lady beside her, with the loveliest smile on her face, and a shimmering ball in her hand, about the size of a pigeon's egg. "There, Irene, there is my work for you," she said, holding out the ball to the princess. She took it in her hand and looked at it all over. It sparkled a little, and shone here and shone there, but not much. It was of a sort of grey whiteness, something like spun glass. "Is this all your spinning, grandmother?" she asked. "All since you came to the house. There is more there than you think." "How pretty it is! What am I to do with it?" "That I will now explain to you," answered the lady, turning from her and going to her cabinet. She came back with a small ring in her hand. Then she took the ball from Irene's and did something with the two. Irene could not tell what. "Give me your hand," she said. Irene held up her right hand. "Yes, that is the hand I want," said the lady, and put the ring on the forefinger of it. "What a beautiful ring," said Irene. "What is the stone called?" "It is a fire opal. Please, am I to keep it?" "Always." "Oh, thank you, grandmother. It's prettier than anything I ever saw, except those, of all colors, in your— Please, is that your crown?" "Yes, it is my crown. The stone in your ring is of the same sort, only not so good. It has only red, but mine have all colors, you see." "Yes, grandmother, I will take such care of it. But," she added, hesitating. "But what?" asked her grandmother. "What am I to say when Ludi asks me where I got it?" "You will ask her where you got it," answered the lady, smiling. "I don't see how I can do that." "You will, though." "Of course I will if you say so, but you know I can't pretend not to know." "Of course not, but don't trouble yourself about it. You will see when the time comes." So saying, the lady turned and threw the little ball into the rose fire. "Oh, grandmother!" exclaimed Irene. "I thought you had spun it for me." "So I did, my child, and you've got it." "No, it's burnt in the fire." The lady put her hand in the fire, brought out the ball, glimmering as before, and held it toward her. Irene stretched out her hand to take it, but the lady turned, and going to her cabinet, opened a drawer and laid the ball in it. "Have I done anything to vex you, grandmother?" said Irene pitifully. "No, my darling, but you must understand that no one ever gives anything to another properly and really without keeping it. That ball is yours." "Oh, I'm not to take it with me. You are going to keep it for me." "You are to take it with you. I've fastened the end of it to the ring on your finger." Irene looked at the ring. "I can't see it there, grandmother," she said. "Feel, a little way from the ring, toward the cabinet," said the lady. "Oh, I do feel it," exclaimed the princess. "But I can't see it," she added, looking close to the outstretched hand. "No, the thread is too fine for you to see it. You can only feel it." Now, you can fancy how much spinning that took, although it does seem like a little ball. "But what use can I make of it if it lies in your cabinet?" "That is what I will explain to you. It would be of no use to you. It wouldn't be yours at all if it did not lie in my cabinet. Now listen. If you ever find yourself in any danger, such, for example, as you are in this evening, you must take off your ring and put it under the pillow of your bed. Then you must lay your forefinger, the same that wore the ring, upon the thread, and follow the thread wherever it leads you." "Oh, how delightful! It will lead me to you, grandmother, I know." "Yes, but remember, it may seem to you a very roundabout way indeed, and you must not double the thread. Of one thing you may be sure, that while you hold it, I hold it too." "It is very wonderful," said Irene thoughtfully. Then suddenly becoming aware, she jumped up crying, "Oh, grandmother! Here I have been sitting all this time in your chair, and you standing. I beg your pardon." The lady laid her hand on her shoulder and said, "Sit down again, Irene. Nothing pleases me better than to see anyone sit in my chair. I am only too glad to stand, so long as anyone will sit in it." "How kind of you," said the princess and sat down again. "It makes me happy," said the lady. "But," said Irene, still puzzled, "won't the thread get in somebody's way and be broken if the one end is fast to my ring and the other laid in your cabinet?" "You will find all that arrange itself. I am afraid it is time for you to go." "Mightn't I stay and sleep with you tonight, grandmother?" "No, not tonight. If I had meant you to stay tonight, I should have given you a bath. But you know, everybody in the house is miserable about you, and it would be cruel to keep them so all night. You must go downstairs." "I'm so glad, grandmother, you didn't say go home, for this is my home. Mayn't I call it my home?" "You may, my child, and I trust you will always think it your home. Now come, I must take you back without anyone seeing you." "Please, I want to ask you one question more," said Irene. "Is it because you have your crown on that you look so young?" "No, child," answered her grandmother. "It is because I felt so young this evening that I put my crown on. And it occurred to me that you would like to see your old grandmother in her best." "Why do you call yourself old? You're not old, grandmother." "I am very old indeed. It is so silly of people. I don't mean you, for you are such a tiny and couldn't know better. But it is so silly of people to fancy that old age means crookedness and witheredness and feebleness and sticks and spectacles and rheumatism and forgetfulness. It is so silly. Old age has nothing whatever to do with all that. The right old age means strength and beauty, and mirth and courage, and clear eyes and strong painless limbs. I am older than you are able to think, and look at you, grandmother," cried Irene, jumping up and flinging her arms around her neck. "I won't be so silly again, I promise. At least, I'm afraid to promise, but if I am, I promise to be sorry for it. I do." "I wish I were as old as you, grandmother. I don't think you are ever afraid of anything." "Not for long, at least, my child. Perhaps by the time I am 2,000 years of age, I shall indeed never be afraid of anything. But I must confess that I have sometimes been afraid about my children. Sometimes about you, Irene." "Oh, I'm so sorry, grandmother. Tonight, I suppose you mean." "Yes, a little tonight, but a good deal when you had all but made up your mind that I was a dream and no real great-great-grandmother. You must not suppose that I am blaming you for that. I dare say it was out of your power to help it." "I don't know, grandmother," said the princess, beginning to cry. "I can't always do myself as I should like, and I don't always try. I'm very sorry anyhow." The lady stooped, lifted her in her arms, and sat down with her in her chair, holding her close to her bosom. In a few minutes, the princess had sobbed herself to sleep. How long she slept, I do not know. When she came to herself, she was sitting in her own high chair at the nursery table with her doll's house before her. End of chapter 15. Please go to the next clip for chapter 16.